And now, Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles presents to you Nicholas London and Cueball Carmichael.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show of shows, the mothership, if you will. And of course, you know me, I'm Nick. But it's not about me, It's all about the man of the hour. He's the man with the power. He's as great as the world is. He's the host of this show. He is Cueball Carmichael. Q, how are you?
Hey Nick, another Tuesday night with Triple T Radio live on YouTube, brother. It's exciting. It's a great night ahead, and hopefully we got some new people watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoy the show, folks.
That's right. Hit like, subscribe. If you think we deserve it, give us a 5-star review. And of course, tonight's show and every show is brought to you by the eCam Network, who brings to you guys this great show with Q here and me here, live like this. It's great. It's awesome. I love the software. I encourage you all, if you want to be in this industry, this is something that you enjoy. Try it out. You won't be disappointed. It's well worth the price of admission. Q, last week on this show, we discussed the NWA, and we said then it was going to be a 3 or 4-parter. We discussed all sorts of great stuff last week. Myself, I thought it was an A1 show. You know so much about the industry, and you never, ever disappoint, my man. Tonight, what are we doing?
Well, we're back talking about the National Wrestling Alliance, one of my favorite subjects. Proud to have held titles in 3 different decades and wrestled for them in 4 different decades. So we're back to talking about, one of my favorite subjects, near and dear to my heart. My trainer Lou Thez, of course, was a multi-time champion there. So, back in the day. So it's one of my favorite subjects to talk about. And we left off last week right at about the change and what also came out of the NWA, which some people know. I think most people don't realize that the reason there's a WWE is because the exodus of Vince McMahon Sr. and Toots Monk was unhappy with the NWA in the Northeast. They had to exited, and they created the WWF, which was the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Later abbreviated to the World Wrestling Federation, and later changed to Wrestling, World Wrestling Entertainment. So it's really, if it weren't for the NWA, there wouldn't be that. And of course, the AWA also came out of there, Vern Gagne's group, and people are familiar or unfamiliar with the fact that the AWA was huge in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. They were packing houses that, in Chicago and Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, all throughout the mid Northwest. They were really packing that in the houses. 15, 20, 30,000 people. It was insane. Hogan came out of there when he signed his contract with WWE. The Iron Sheik came through there. Roddy Piper came through there, of course, from the NWA too. As did Larry Zbyszko. Just so many great wrestlers came out of the AWA that we learned to know and love, both in WCW and the WWF, WWE. So we're going to get to the point where people started exiting and creating other groups that became major groups. And we had gotten to the point where Buddy Rogers was the heavyweight champion of the NWA, and that was back in. We're not talking about really the first time, but we're up to the second time, which is about 62. But then some interesting things started to happen in the NWA with people leaving, and this is where it gets kind of exciting to me, because for instance, there was a period of time when Buddy Rogers was the champion. and then Luthez won the title back, and that was in 1963. And promoters in the Northeast were refusing to recognize Rogers' one fall loss to Thez. They thought that title back then, and a lot of them were 2 out of 3 falls, and they didn't want to recognize the one fall title change. So what happened was, is Tubes-Mont and Vince McMahon Sr. left, and they started the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and made Rogers their first champion. So it was a pretty big deal for that to happen. And about that time too, we had a very unhappy Vern Gagne, who was tired of the NWA in his territory, not recognizing him, so he exited about the same time, and he had left, and went to Minneapolis, where he's from, as most people know, and he started the AWA, it was the American Wrestling Alliance, and so that all happened about the same time, and really it seemed that the NWA was starting to crumble a little bit. There was a lot of unhappy promoters in their territories. They didn't feel in their territories that certain people, including Fez, should be a champion, or Rogers should be a champion. So they started to leave out of there, which really was the best thing that could have happened to pro wrestling, in my opinion.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at right now is, let's break it down. I mean, let's break this whole thing down. Anyone who is anyone in this industry knows Ric Flair broke in with Vern Gagne. So, Vern's gone. He's got the AWA. He's got a vision. He's excited. He knows he's got the guys he needs in place to do just that. Vincent McMahon, he's heading to New York. He knows what he wants. He's got Buddy Rogers. He's excited. Okay? Now, Hulk Hogan, down the road, is going to become the man. He's going to be Vince McMahon Jr.'s baby. That's for later. That's 83. We're not even going there, but I'm just setting the stage for this. Ric Flair in the AWA, where he would begin what would become one of the greatest, if not the greatest, runs in professional wrestling. Debatable, sure. Be hard to pick one. What do? The NWA's sitting there, Q. They just lost 2 really smart men. What would you do if this was you? This is your company. Vince McMahon is to your left, and you've got Vern to your right. What does Cueball Carmichael do now?
Cueball Carmichael does what Jim Crockett Promotions eventually does. The Midwest is sewn up with Vern Gagne. He's got position. He's got connections. You've got the Northeast with Vince McMahon Sr. and Tubes-Mont. They've got position there. They've got connections there. What does that leave open? Which was huge at the time. So where am I going to go? I'm going to go to one of the major cities, and I'm going to dominate the South. I'm going to go to Atlanta, probably as my base, and I'm going to work and dominate, the South area. Most people don't know it, but the great thing about Atlanta is you get on a plane in Atlanta at Jackson Hartsfield Airport, and you can be to 90% of the continental U.S. within a 4-hour flight. So Atlanta is the hub. It's the hub of flying. So that's what I would do, and eventually that is what Jim Crockett did. But we're not up to that point yet. What we want to do is stick with the NWA. Now we've lost. We've lost, and we've got the Worldwide Wrestling Federation operating in the Northeast, and we have got Vern Gagne and the AWA in the Midwest. So what do? Well, they have Thez as the champion, and what they do is they start moving the title around a little bit, I think, to create interest, and they put it on Gene Kiniski, which I think was a great choice, and that was in '66. And Gene actually held the title for 3 years, and Gene was very popular, great wrestler. And then there started to be a change. Dory Funk Jr. got the title from Kaninsky in '69. Held it for 4 years. Wrestled all over the United States and in Japan. They were heavy hitters in Japan when they had Briscoe and Giant Baba feuding. And then Baba wins the title from Briscoe in Toyohashi, Japan, okay, in 1974. And that really, if you look at title changes, a lot of them happened in Japan. But then you'll see the title changes start gearing towards the South a little bit. And you'll start to see the NWA run and scene on Georgia Championship Wrestling. So let's work our way there if we can. So we've got in 70 holds it till 1975, and Terry Funk wins it. So now we've got Dory Funk, who wins it in 1969.
Yeah.
And then we've got Terry Funk, who wins it 1975. So we've got two Funk brothers that have been heavyweight champions, which was the first time at that time that it had been done. And in between those, Dory Funk loses it to Harley Race and really starts the world knowing who Harley Race is in '73. Race has it really for a very short period of time in '73. He had it for about 3 months, and that's when he dropped it to Briscoe. Briscoe drops it to Giant Baba. Giant Baba has it for a grand total of, if I'm not mistaken, about 7 or 8 days. Drops it back to Briscoe. Now Briscoe's a 2-time champion. Briscoe drops it to Funk, as I said. Funk has the title for a few days, drops it to Dusty Rhodes. That's Rhodes' first NWA Heavyweight Championship in Tampa, Florida. As everybody knows, at that particular time, there was Florida Championship Wrestling. It was still a territory, and Dusty Rhodes was huge down there.
Oh boy!
Now they got to, just massive. I mean, he owned the state of Florida, and that's where he in '79 when he was champion, NWA champion. That's where he really honed the working man and the son of a plumber, and got that stuff down to a science. People loved him. He has to lose it to a heel. He drops it to Harley Race. Harley Race is now a 3-time NWA champion. Harley Race goes to Japan, and he drops it a few months later to Giant Baba, who becomes a 2-time champion. Because what they were doing is they were drawing great houses here, but in Japan, they were drawing 50 and 60,000 people to these events when the NWA Championship was still, a big deal. And in part, that's due to Lou Thesz, who had incredible popularity in Japan. So that title continued to carry a lot of clout. Rhodes loses it, they said, to Race. Race loses it back to Baba in Japan. And then Baba drops it back to Race in Japan. And now Race is a 4-time champion. Race wrestles again and drops it about 9 months later to Giant Baba again in Japan. So now Giant Baba is a 3-time champion. Race just lost it for the 4th time. And then we got Harley Race, who wins it back from Baba 7 days later in Japan again. And Harley Race comes back to the States, and he's champion for a year. And they're looking for a baby face. They're looking for a guy they can move that title to. And along comes a guy who at the time was probably the hottest wrestler in the country. In 1980, 81, it was Tommy Wildfire Rich. And again, as we know, Tommy Rich had a very short title reign, but it was long enough for, I think, 14 days, 15 days. It was long enough to have another title change. And Tommy Rich won it in Augusta, Georgia, by the way. Georgia boy, hot, popular, on fire. That's what I call him, Wildfire. He had a lot of babyface fire. He loses it back in Gainesville, Georgia, to Harley Race. Now, you see what they're starting to do. They're out of Japan, and there's New Japan has been formed, and All Japan has been formed. So Japan has formed their own wrestling leagues. Giant Baba has formed a wrestling league, and I believe it was Antonio Inoki had formed another one. So there was 2 big promotions in Japan now, running and dominating the houses, booking great talent, American talent and Japanese talent. So now they're in the South. Tommy has the title. He drops it back to Harley Race in '81. I believe Harley won it on May 1st of 81,
Yeah.
and he becomes a six-time, excuse me, heavyweight champion. At that time, this is 1981. A six-time champion is a very rare thing. It just doesn't happen. Titles did not change hands on a weekly or a television program or a pay-per-view, which wasn't invented yet. These titles were used and maneuvered to create asses 18 inches apart, and they did a really good job. But now they're anchored heavily in the South. So what they do is Tommy Rich loses it back to Race. Race has it from the I believe May 1st, and he loses it in late June to Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes is now a two-time champion. And then we get on September 17th, 1981, Ric Flair wins the National Wrestling Alliance Heavyweight Championship in Lou Thesz's hometown and Harley's hometown of Kansas City, Missouri. At this point, you can see the change coming, the evolution of the Nature Boy, a guy who I feel personally is in the top three wrestlers of all time on planet Earth. Couldn't have more respect for a guy, look, anybody that spends 50 years in the wrestling business and has 2 or 3 marriages, there's going to be a little dirt on the guy. That doesn't change the fact that he is a complete and utter legend in the professional wrestling business. And there isn't one of the boys out there that doesn't love him. I mean, he is just the boy's boy,
But you gotta love him. I mean, it is Ric Flair. Now, before you continue on, one of the things I'm noticing, and this is the pattern I'm noticing, and then I'm gonna give you the floor again to discuss it. But we're talking 1,031 days of reigning. We're talking 1,500. We're talking thousands going backwards, 3,000. But if you notice, from about 72, 73, all the way to 81, that title really wasn't sticking on the guys the way it did in the 60s at all. Not even close. I
It
mean,
was all over the place.
but
It was all over the
but
place.
you said
And I think
something.
the NWA was looking for the guy.
But yeah, you said something at the beginning of this show about trying to find the right guy, because we all know that if you don't have the right guy in the right place at the right time, and we can sit here and name guys that have been fortunate like that, but if you're not 100% set, you're not going to sell out that building every single night. And God knows the NWA, what they're famous for is they went everywhere. There was no place, there was no places unknown. They would go anywhere.
Right.
But what do you think? You
Right.
see thousands and 2,000s, and now you're only seeing the five. I think, what was it? 500 was one of the highest. 900 is the highest in that area, which was Harley. We all love Harley.
Right.
We know Harley. If anyone was good in that spot, and I'm not degrading guys like Jack Briscoe or Dory Funk, because we're going to get there. We're going to talk about them in a moment. But what do you think it was about Harley when they put that belt on him? Maybe they felt a little comfort there, What do you think?
Well, they did feel comfort because you have to understand the NWA during a very tough period of time when Lou Thesz had the title for as long as he did. When they went into a territory, a lot of times the promoter would send a hitman out to take the title. They wanted to control that title. So with Lou Thesz, they knew him being a hooker, they couldn't do it. He would, if he had to, he'd break the guy's leg and win the match. So they couldn't do it with Lou. Harley's one of the toughest guys that ever came down the pike. I mean, guys were legitimately afraid of Harley. When Harley got mad or got upset, everybody shut their mouth and puckered, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do know.
So Harley was one of those guys. but they're searching for an identity. And what they started to do, Terry Funk won the title from Briscoe in Miami. And then in Toronto, Canada, Harley Race won it back. So they were trying to work in Toronto. But then they come back down to Tampa, Florida when Dusty Rhodes wins it. Harley wins it from Dusty in Orlando. Then they jump back to Japan because big houses, big money. Giant Baba wins it over there. Drops it back to Harley in Japan on the same tour. Harley drops it back to Baba on the same tour. And then Baba drops it back to Harley in Japan. But then they come back when Tommy Rich wins it in Augusta, Georgia. And what was happening then is the establishment of Gordon Soley had left Miami for Florida Championship Wrestling. He had left and went to Georgia Championship Wrestling. And Georgia Championship Wrestling, starting in 79, I believe, was on WTBS. It was on there for many years, but it started its dominance in 79. And Gordon Soley, they had the smallest studio wrestling, and they would set up the angles to fill the Omni, which held about 26,000 people. And all title changes back then were at sold-out events where they packed houses. There was no closed circuit or pay-per-view yet. So Georgia Championship Wrestling starts to dominate and be the dominant promotion for the NWA title. And this goes on up until something really strange happened. And I'll tell you, because I was watching it, I didn't understand. In 1980, we started getting Georgia Championship Wrestling where I was raised in upstate New York. And I saw it, and I saw Flair, and I saw Race, and I saw all these guys. And all I'd been exposed to was the WWF and the WWF. So for me, these were the guys I was reading about in magazines that I never got to see.
Right.
I wasn't in the wrestling business yet. That would be a couple years down the road. So now I'm getting to see these guys and see what a different style the NWA was over the WWF. So I was very interested in it. It caught my eye. And one day I'm watching, and this is in 1982, I think, right before I left for Hawaii to go be trained to be a wrestler. I'm watching Georgia Championship Wrestling, and Ric Flair wrestles a double countout against WWF Heavyweight Champion Bob Backlund. And what happens is, sort of a debacle happens there. Vince McMahon actually comes in and shows up on the TV one day on Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I'm like, what the hell's McMahon doing? He bought out the Georgia Championship Wrestling group. And he shows up, and he's bringing some WWF wrestlers with him. And Backlund and Flair go to a count out because I don't think Vince was quite sure whether he was going to have the Georgia Championship Wrestling NWA champion or he was going to keep Backlund. And it was a really, really crazy thing. And that was Atlanta, Georgia. And then something really weird happened. In 82, they went to the Dominican Republic. And Flair is wrestling Jack Veneno. And there is a riotous crowd in the audience. I mean, the audience is going crazy. They realize in the middle of the match that if Flair wins, which he was supposed to, that he's probably not going to get out of the venue alive. It was very similar to Puerto Rico.
Yes.
So Flair actually gets pinned by Veneno to avoid a riot from the audience, but the titles returned to Flair because Veneno had pinned him with his feet on the ropes. And then they started to learn that when you went to places like the Dominican Republic and San Juan, Puerto Rico for Carlos Colon, yes, you would pack the place, but heels were in a very dangerous and precarious position where they might not get out alive. So it was kind of crazy. And, Flair and Rhodes had this thing where Dusty was suspended and he had to be the Midnight Rider. And that was all around that period of time. And in 83, Dusty under the mask beat Flair, but returns the belt when he was asked to identify himself by NWA President Bob Geigel. So he gives the belt right back to Flair. And then Flair goes to San Juan, Puerto Rico. And at that time, Carlos Colon was putting 50 and 60,000 people in stadiums that were really built for 30. But Carlos was stuffing them in there. He was wrestling. He was on top. He was on fire. And Carlos Colon actually wins the title from Flair in 1983. It was I'm trying to think. I believe it was January. It might be June. I know it's a J word, but anyway. And he has the title in a week, and he drops it back to Ric Flair. And then Ric Flair has the title, and Ric Flair does the favor, drops it back to Harley Race one more time. So Harley Race is now a 7-time NWA heavyweight champion. They wanted a modern guy in the wrestling business, one of their own, to have the title as many times as Luthez did back in the day or more times, so they could set themselves apart, I believe, from the old National Wrestling Alliance as the new Wrestling Alliance, the new National Wrestling Alliance. So Flair dropped it back or Race dropped it back to Flair in '83, and Flair's the champion again. And now we're in really the heyday of Ric Flair. We're into his second reign as champion, and this is where he just continually dominates. And the only time there's a title change is when it will put more people in the seats and make more money. So we're up now to 1983.
Okay, we're gonna get the 80. I'm sidebarring now. Okay, this is where I'm sidebarring. Okay, um, the business got shook up in '72. If you know where I'm going with this, Ric Flair was in a
I know exactly where you're going.
Flair could have been killed. Let's be honest. The pilot was killed. You know,
White trash, yeah.
we saw the end of Valentine. It was crazy. You know, brother, I'm sure you were hearing about it. It was a big, I mean, it was huge. I mean, let's be honest. In that time, it was unheard of for two guys that were getting ready to tear it up to be seen together. And everyone who is everybody has heard Ric Flair say in interviews, the first guy to show up at the hospital and see him is Wahoo McDaniels.
Yep.
What is going through your head hearing that as you read all the history and you're explaining to all the fans everything, literally right down to the brass? But what goes through your head here now? What if? And I'm so glad Rick is here with us today. What is your thought? Had Ric Flair not been here, would the business had been different? Would Ricky Steamboat had been our Ric Flair? Could Dusty have been our world's champion 16, 17 times? What do you think, Q? What goes through your head here now?
What goes through my head is the business would be completely different today, not just in the history of the NWA, but in the WWF or WWE as we have now, the AWA in its era. I mean, so many things would have been different, and just the people that got in the business because of Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that got in the wrestling business did it because they saw Ric Flair. And they thought as a kid, I want to be that guy. I want to try to be that guy. So it would have changed everything, but it also takes the main opponent for a lot of these guys, especially Harley Race and Rhodes, out of the picture. So now, how do you find a guy that fits with Harley and fits with Dusty? And later on is smart enough when there's a riotous situation to tell the guy in the ring, I'm putting you over, put with your feet on the ropes. You know what I mean? Where do you get a guy that's got that charisma, that mindset? I remember watching when I first saw. I never was sure about the money in pro wrestling until I saw Ric Flair. I saw Ric Flair in the suits and the $1,000 suits and the $150 Ole Cassini tie, and the Bruno Magli shoes, and talking about taking jets and showing up in limousines and vignettes and stuff. When I saw that, and then I read where he was the highest paid athlete in 1981, I believe it was, in the entire country, including football, basketball, hockey, and baseball. That's when I realized, hey, there might be some money in the wrestling business. So Ric Flair, and I never got in it for the money. I got in it. I knew at 9 years old I was going to be in wrestling because of my mother's reaction to it on television. And she never watched it again. It was that one night, and that one night her reaction was enough 9 years old to tell me this is what I want to do with my life. So for me, no Ric Flair. God,
It's
it's like
different.
when you watch a show. I watched the show Ancient Aliens, right? And they talk about all these places around the world that have pyramids, the dimensions, and the way they face the constellations are exactly the same. The pictures of spacemen are exactly the same, and one is in Peru, and one is over in Iraq, and one is in somewhere in Egypt, and they never could meet each other back then, 10,000 years ago or whatever. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. This is equally hard for me to wrap my mind about what the wrestling business would have been if Ric Flair had maybe broken his back worse than he did, because he did break his back. Thank God it was a lower break and he could still wrestle. But what if he had not survived, or what if he had been Valentine and had ended his career? I can't imagine the face of professional wrestling without Ric Flair in it. I can't. That's one of those things. I'd love to tell you I do this, that, the other thing. I can't wrap my head around it, Nick. I can't. I don't know what I would do. How
Explain
about you?
it. Well, I think that without the age of Ric Flair, we look at guys. Okay, I don't see pro wrestling without Ric Flair. I grew up a WWF fan. Okay, my whole life was Hogan taking Andre down. When I started seeing Flair, it was in 92 when he showed up in the WWF. After that, I was hooked. Everything about him just drew me to him. So the thought of sitting here with you right now and saying, the 92 Rumble, what I call still to this day one of the greatest performances of all time. Oh my God, it was unbelievable. Hulk Hogan won. Wrong. But what if Flair wasn't there? Would Hogan have gotten the 3? Would that have been his 3rd in a row? You know what I mean? We'll never know. But the wrestling business is a better place because Ric Flair was in it. I want you to explain to the fans how big a deal it is that Wahoo McDaniels would show up at the hospital when they're fixing that night, the same night that the accident happened, they were fixing to go at it. And he showed up to see him at the hospital. Explain to the fans, Q, just how huge, especially in the 70s, that is.
Well, that was extremely huge because they were feuding at the time, and that actually broke kayfabe, which was the law of wrestling before it was let out of the bag in the 80s and in the 90s. So for a wrestler to do that, number one, you'd have to know who I fortunately did, and the kind of man he was, but also the respect level that Wahoo and Flair had for each other. You know, for his arch nemesis, at the time, to go to the hospital to see him, it said two things. It said, number one, Wahoo put his brothers in the business before the business, which is good, and he was willing to take the chance. And something happens. And I can tell you that you could find this with Brett and Sean. They didn't like each other, but they had spectacular matches.
Oh
And
boy.
there's no love between those two. There's an immense respect between those two. And it's the same way with Wahoo and Rick. When you go out there and wrestle with a guy, and this is what a lot of people don't know, there's been, excluding heart attacks, let's talk about fatal injuries. 23 wrestlers in the past 30 years have died in the ring due to injuries suffered in the ring. So this is a big deal. You're putting your life in another man's hand, and you're trusting. There's a sacred trust that's unwritten that I will go out there with you, and we will both give 100%. I will do my best to make you look great. I know you'll do the same for me. But at the end of this match, we'll meet in the locker room, and we'll shake hands and ask if everything was okay. and we'll move on. Be a little winded, maybe a little bruised, but I put my life in your hands, and you can trust me to put your life in my hands. And that was the unwritten sacred trust of professional wrestling. And it earned an awful lot of respect with guys, especially when matches were as physical as they were back in the 60s and 70s with guys like Flair and Wahoo. So it was a really big deal that Wahoo went there. A big deal. And it also told the character of Rick and the character of Wahoo. And they were impeccable. And so, it was for me, it was like, the whole deal with Magnum and Nikita, when that came out. To me, it shows that the level of respect and that love, the infection that you have for a man, that you're in there night after night after night, and people don't understand, they sometimes would wrestle the same guy in different territories 2 or 3 days a week for a year and a half
Yeah,
straight.
certainly.
I mean, it was like that.
Yeah.
So you're not in the ring with a guy one time and you go to the hospital and visit him. At that point, they've probably been in there over 75 or 80 times together, And so it's a big deal. And it was a big deal that Wahoo went. But that was the level of character of Wahoo and the level of character of Rick. And Rick would have done the same thing for Wahoo, I guarantee it.
Absolutely. All right, Q. It's that wonderful time where first things first, my man. I got to talk about Ecamm. Okay, Ecamm is
Brother.
the official network of this amazing show that we just love so much called Triple T Radio. But also, Q, it is the network of Truth Busters, your show on Sunday with Johnny Stewart, which I'm going to get to because I want to recap that. Also, it is the official show for Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles. So it's all things Triple T Radio. Now, we have all sorts of great stuff to talk about, Q, and I bet you know where I'm going with this. Brother, I was getting up this morning. I couldn't find my keys. I couldn't find my cell phone. I couldn't find nothing. Couldn't find my toothbrush, Q. It was a horrible scene this morning. But thank goodness, I popped a brainstorm. Moments later, I found it. Turns out my phone, back pocket. Toothbrush, where I always have it. In the bathroom, beside the sink, It was on my keys, in my ignition in my car where I leave them every single day. Yep, it was unbelievable, Q. I'm telling you, brother. I hope you're taking these because I know one thing. You're the guy with all the connections when it comes to Brainstorm.
Well, it's funny. I said this morning to my wife. My wife started about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and she's much younger than me, closer to your age than she is to mine by far. And I said, "Hey, try it. It's not going to hurt." But I put up today for the first time when I advertised it on Facebook that it was designed by a pro wrestler for pro wrestlers. And anybody else that has had any head trauma, traumatic brain injury, or played football or any sports, or somebody that just at that age or so overloaded at work at a young age that they're having difficulty staying on task, remembering, have a little depression going on or a little bit of anxiety. It works for that. I've went through my bouts of depression. I've been very honest about it. But, I started brainstorming in October, and my wife and I sat down last week when she decided to take it. And one of the reasons why is she said, since you've been taking that, you've not had one, and I have mild cases of depression the last 2 or 3 days, but I've had none of those since I've been taking Brainstorm. And that was one of the design features. We want it for memory and focus, but we would also put 41 different vitamins and ingredients in there, all natural ingredients, by the way, that also help with mild depression and anxiety. And in addition, if you're taking medication for that, these are completely safe to take with it because they're all natural. Several of my customers actually take, things like Topamax or things like Wellbutrin or things like, Lexapro, and they can add this in, and it's completely safe. If you're on a blood thinner, it does not have any vitamin K in it because people with blood thinners regimes can't take it, so it's safe for them. But one of the side effects of this And somebody finally said to me, too, people have said it to me that have tried the product and are taking it continuously, religiously, buying multiple bottles at a time, is that you sleep so much better. I have suffered from a sleep disorder since I was 5 years old, and I used to sleepwalk. And then it morphed into not being able to sleep. And my wife would see when we first met 17 years ago, go 2 and 3 days where I would work. I owned a home improvement business. I would work. I would go out for dinner and drinks. When the bar closed, I would go back to work and work till 6 or 7 in the morning, then open my business and work all day. I would go like that for 2 or 3 or 4 days, then I dropped for 12 or 15 hours. So you don't want that in your life. It's not healthy. It really can lead to a lot of health disorders. So I didn't want that. So later in life, I started sleeping okay. But when you're banged up as a wrestler, you got to move because you feel an ache or a pain or whatever. I created a pillow, as you know, a few months ago that's fantastic. It's the memory foam adjustable pillow with the magnificent cover. I sleep good with that. When I added the brainstorm in for the first time in the history, since I've been tracking my sleep with a Fitbit for the last 5 years, I have never had a night where I've gotten more than 2 hours of REM. That's restorative sleep, deep sleep. I now get 2+ hours on a regular basis, and a couple times a week I'll get 3 hours. And man, when I wake up with that much sleep, I feel like I got a jolt of electricity. I got to get my feet on the floor and start going to work. I mean, it's seriously like that. And here it is, 8 o'clock at night. I've been up since 5:45 this morning, and no accident. I'm going 100 miles an hour, and I feel fantastic. This keeps your brain from being exhausted. One of the things that people say to me is, Q, I come home from work and physically I'm not exhausted because my job isn't physical, but mentally I'm wiped out. I want to sit on the couch and vegetate. I don't want to get up and cook dinner or interact with my family. And I can tell you that Brainstorm takes care of that mental exhaustion. That mental fatigue that happens is because you're not feeding the brain the right things. You're not getting GABA in your diet. You're not getting choline in your diet. You're not getting N-acetyl L-tyrosine in your diet. You're not getting enough vitamin C. This has 100% of vitamin C, B5, B3, B4. It has that in there. And inositol, phosphodilysin, bacopa. It's just got so many good things that feed the brain.
Really quickly, okay, number one, I want to tell the fans, TripleTRadio.com. Soon as you guys go there, you land right on the landing page, and you can see all of our sponsors, and you guys can click them and go. Q, you were talking on Truth Busters on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Atlantic, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific, that the coronavirus, okay, everything's crazy in the world, we know that. And I'm asking this, you can say, Nick, I don't want to talk about it right now, and that's totally fine. Should the people expect a delay with your products with Amazon right now?
No, Amazon has stopped receiving any new products except for medical supplies and household goods like Lysol, toilet paper, towels. Receiving is not taking anything else in the inventory. But I knew this was coming, and I've stocked up on Brainstorm. So I've got several hundred Brainstorm in the warehouse. Amazon Prime members get free 1 day, 2 day shipping. They get you can order it today and you'll have it today's Tuesday, you'll have it by Thursday. My pillow the same way. It's already in the warehouse, it's stocked. You order it through Prime, free shipping, you'll get it in a day or two. It's at all my products are at multiple warehouses. So you get that benefit of Prime, which 54% of American households now have Amazon Prime. Excuse me, 84% of American households have Prime, and a lot of people in Canada have it. I'm not in Canada yet. Once this is over, we will be in the Canadian market, the German market in Germany, Europe, Mexico, and Australia. Right now, we're just in the American market, but yes, it's still available, and you can get it in 2 days.
There you go, guys. It is still available, so you can still get it. There is the answer to, I'm sure, a lot of questions. This is This was all talked about, referring to the coronavirus, on Truthbusters this past Sunday night, guys. All available on YouTube. Go there. You can find everything you need. Now, this here, we're back. We got about 15, 20 minutes left, Q. Let's dive right in. You were talking about Ric Flair, the Crash. Then you got into Magnum. Really quickly, I'm hearing that Magnum TA's son is becoming quite the specimen in the pro wrestling world. Have you heard this?
Yeah, yes, I've heard it too. And there's a couple of kids that are really good in the professional wrestling business. It worked out pretty good for Bob Orton's son.
Oh,
I think
boy.
it'll work out just as well for Magnum's son. I mean, I met Magnum in 1988 after his accident. He came into Luthez Academy was really a ring in a warehouse because Lou was a minimalist. So we would go work out at Ghent Athletic Center to the gym, and we go over there. And Magnum lived close by at the time, so he stopped over a couple of times. So I got to meet him. Great guy, friends with him on Facebook to this day. Super guy, and I think his kid has got a great future in the wrestling business, man. I really do. He's in shape. He looks great. He's second generation. Maggie may not be able to get in there and go like he used to, but he can sure train his kid, and you make sure. More importantly, when Bobby Orton trained, where did he send him?
Bobby Orton's son?
Yeah, where did Bob send Randy to be trained? Do you know?
Tom Pritchard, didn't he?
Harley Race.
St. Louis. Right, Kansas
Yeah.
City, right in his backyard. My apologies. You're right.
If you can't train your kid, you send him to the best.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
most certainly.
So, guys are smart. They know where they need to go. So you can learn how to wrestle. If you're going to get in the wrestling business, or you're in the wrestling business, let me give you a little hint because I got a little bit of time at WWE here and there back in the late '90s. It hasn't changed. I know William Regal personally. Manny Fernandez has asked me to help him get guys ready. When he was booking all the talent for the Carolinas and Virginia, the enhancement talent. And I've spent 3-day weekends with him getting guys ready. He's come to my camps and helped train. It's no secret. Learn to use the corner once and the ropes once in a 10-minute match, and you spend the rest of the time wrestling in the middle and making it make sense and finish it with what you started with and sticking to a body part. It's real simple math. And you go get in front of Regal and you'll get yourself a job. You go get in front of anybody that's got anything to do with the WWE. If you can go 10 minutes in the middle, use the ropes once, maybe twice, the corners once, maybe twice, but tell a story, put it together, make the beginning cohesive with the ending, and boom, you'll get a job. And you look at these specimens that they have today. It's not the world. When I went up there in the 90s, I said, man, it's the land of the giants. Everybody was diesel and jacked up. And now they're lean and they're fast. And it's a whole different breed of animal. So you don't got to have 21-inch arms now. You can have ripped 17-inch arms and have your six-pack of abs and get yourself a job if you know what the hell you're doing. You don't have to be that gigantic monster anymore.
No,
So,
those days are over.
Ric Flair is on title reign number 8. And how this happens is after Flair wins it back from Race for the last time, he loses it to Race. He wins it from Race. And then World Class Championship Wrestling is a proud member of the National Wrestling Alliance. And they are drawing and packing the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas. Kerry Von Erich, who the world loves. And they are packing every place they go with Kerry in Texas, which is a massive state. They're packing the buildings. The NWA is not stupid. They're looking at Kerry going, he's a baby face. Flair's a heel. Do we have what we need to have a title change, and how are we going to do that? And we decide that they're going to book the Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Irving, Texas, and on the 5th June, I believe, 1984, Kerry Von Erich faces Ric Flair in Irving, Texas, in front of 56,000 people, and Kerry Von Erich wins the National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Championship in what some people did see coming if you lived in Texas. If you lived anywhere else, you didn't see it coming, most likely. So it was really, really a big deal.
And
Fritz Von Erich has dedicated a great deal of his life to wrestling. So it was a proud moment. Go ahead, Nick.
No. I mean, like you said, it was Irving, Texas. But, for those of you that maybe are a little younger and you're just thinking, well, it's Texas. So what? Sean's from Texas. We could sit here all day long. Yeah, the Von Erichs and, not to mention Stone Cold Steve Austin. The list is on and on. But when the Von Erichs were in Texas, it was different. The feel was different. The Von Erichs were over in Texas like Hulk Hogan was over in the WWF, if not bigger.
Actually, they were over like the Beatles were when they came to the U.S. Girls
I rest my case.
Fainting. That was how big they were.
Yep.
They were as big in Texas as the Beatles were when they came to the U.S. I'd never seen anything like it in wrestling. Women fainting, girls crying when they saw them walk by, guys jumping, a foot in the air, grown men. Men loved them, women loved them, kids loved them, grandparents loved them. Everybody loved the Von Erichs. Kerry was the chosen one. He had the looks and the body and the charisma.
He had it all.
And he was the baby face. He had it all.
Yep.
He had it
all. He was a total pack.
Kerry win. Oh, yeah. It was, and what people don't understand, too, is, you hear me when we talk a lot, I refer to as a business decision. Because ultimately, when you're dealing with houses of 100 or 200, there's no business decisions made. You're just having fun, and it's a hobby. But when you're drawing 50,000 people, you're selling out buildings of 25,000, you're paying wrestlers $10,000 a night.
Yeah.
That's the wrestling business. And you make business decisions. You don't make decisions based on emotion. So the business decision here was this. Kerry's hot. They're NWA affiliates. They're paying their fee. He could win the title. They can continue, no matter how long he has it, to say Kerry Von Erich, former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. They're going to draw forever on that name and the fact that he had that title. Fritz has busted his ass in the wrestling business, and we're going to do the favor for the kid, and we're going to put the belt on him for a few days. We're going to put it on long enough so that he can say he was the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. And I think it was a brilliant decision on the part of the National Wrestling Alliance. I think it was well-deserved for Fritz and his family. And we all know the tragedy that struck after that was just horrific. No family should ever go through what they went through. We're not going to go into it. That's a whole nother show. So at the time, if I'm the president of the National Wrestling Alliance and I see what's happening, I go to Ric Flair. I say, I need you to do me a favor, brother. I need you to put this Von Erich kid over in the middle, and I need you to skate and come back in another place and another time and win that title back from Kerry. So he does, in Osaka, Japan, where Flair was massively huge, Kerry drops the title to him. Out of Texas in the South so that Flair can get out alive. Number one, because if Flair had beat him in Texas, there's a pretty good chance he would have never got out of anywhere in Texas alive if he beat Kerry.
Pretty good chance.
That's insane down there. Somebody would have prison shanked him.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question.
And keep in mind, too, Starrcade is already blooming. It's already started. And we know how big Starrcade would become. And we're going to talk about all that next week, I'm sure. But at this point,
we're just going through the history of the promotions, the title, in the spinoffs. That's why I said it had to be 3 or 4
Yeah.
parts.
Oh, yeah.
Next week we're going to get into the Switch, the WCW Switch. We're going to get into the Starrcade, the JCP, Jim Crockett Promotions, and all the good stuff in between. Right now, we're just trying to cover the titles and get us somewhat up to date, which is extremely difficult to do because every time you have a title change, practically, there's a story behind it. You know, it isn't just happening.
No, that's right. Yeah.
When you're doing that much money, they sat down in a room, a board of directors, just like a corporation, just like Coca-Cola, and the board of directors makes a decision on where to put that belt and why. And so that's what they did there.
And remember, in Yokosuka, Japan, when Rick got it back in '84, that was also the debut of the big gold belt, which we'll talk about just how big that became in itself. So, you know, for those who think the NWA it was good when it was there, there's a lot of history that we've talked about in 2 weeks. That big gold belt alone is worth an entire show.
But I do have to get to the next.
The
next segment. So Bonnier drops back to Flair, and then Flair wrestles to a double countout against AWA World Heavyweight Champion Rick Martel on, I believe, the 21st of October, 1985, in Sold Out Egg Dome in Tokyo, Japan. Now, here's a guy that, if you ask me, a guy that had everything Rick Martel. Rick Martel had the body, the looks, the charisma. Unfortunately, when you do what Vince had done with him and make him the model, he's kind of stuck with this shtick that takes away from the skill, the ability, and he's a fellow Canadian. I mean, just Rick Martel is like a Ric Flair in the fact that they had it all. You know, the charisma. He wasn't the bleach one, but he had the charisma. He had the body. He was even with his French Canadian accent, he was good on this deck. You know, I just think that Rick Martel was one of the most inefficiently used men in wrestling, and yeah, he made a lot of money with Vince. But I didn't like seeing the gimmick put on him because I knew what his skill and ability level was. And as the AWA World Heavyweight Champion, when the AWA was still packing houses, he did make a nice paycheck. And he made even more money when the jump, because, you know, back when the jump happened, when the guys jumped from the AWA was still drawing. They were getting paychecks. When they jumped, they were getting things like $250,000 cash bonuses. And Vince was doubling their salary, tripling it sometimes, and even a couple times I know quadrupling what they were making. So, once again, wrestling business, right?
Oh, yeah.
Wrestlers are wrestling at that point above the indies. In a situation like this, you're wrestling making business decisions because you know that wrestling, I always said the bad thing about wrestling is by the time I got it, I was too old to do it because I'm a slow learner. But it's a business that actually has a time. It's like food. It has an expiration date.
Absolutely.
You know, you have a bump card, as everybody calls it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so for me, I understand why he did it and how much money he got for doing it. But really, truly, if I can say one guy I hated the gimmick, I hated the way it made him look, I hated the fact that I didn't get to see him be a pure wrestler anymore, was Rick Martel.
Well, the thing is before we're done this whole series of shows on the NWA, one of the things we're going to do is go back and we're going to look at, you know, Vince signing Ricky Steamboat, Vince signing the model. You know, we're going to talk about that. Ric Flair went there. And we're just going to look at the comparison.
What we have to talk about is when we're done with the NWA series, we have to do the two groups that spun off, the AWA and the WWF, WWF, WWE, because they spun off.
Where'd they go?
Still there, buddy?
Oh, yeah.
Still there? I don't know. Right. And so we have to cover that as part of the NWA. What we're trying to do now is just make our way to current day NWA, which, it's not easy to do in an hour. We've got 2 hours into it now, and we're just now into Ric Flair becoming the man. If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. Ric Flair's famous saying. My insurance agent told me that 3 weeks ago when I walked in his office, because he calls me Q because he used to come to all my events here. I go in, he goes, I went in with my new department. I went in with my sergeant, and the sergeant goes, you know this guy? He goes, hey, Q, comes up, gives me a hug, and says, hey, what's going on? And I switched my insurance to him, and I saved $35 a month, which is $35 a month, $500 a year. So,
wow.
But it was just kind of funny that my sergeant looked and he called me Q, and my sergeant knows the history of me wrestling, but I think it was strange for him to see somebody not call me Chris or officer or whatever. It's just Q. So he was like, wow.
Well,
He said that. He goes, hey, you know what they say? If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. So you tell me what you're paying, and I'll beat the man.
Well, I can tell you this, Officer Jackson. We're going to do this month with all this NWA stuff, but I can promise fans this. In the month of April, we're going to cover, I've got some profile shows we're going to do, similar to when we did oh goodness, I apologize. We've been all over the place here. We've done a profile show. Can you please, if you can even remember, I know we're all over the place here, but we did a profile show. We're going to do more of them, but I got a couple on tap for you guys that I'm going to get Q to do. We're also going to talk, like Q said, about the WWF, the AWA. We're going to put them together. We're going to figure that out. But before we can get to all that, we got to finish this NWA stuff because it's too good to pass up. And like Q just said right there, we are at the man. And when you get to the man, you got to spend time talking about the man because he didn't give us all this blood, sweat, and tears for nothing. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
The business.
Rick made some great decisions for the business and helped it in great ways at many times in his life. And if you want to hear the next segment about Ric Flair and his championship and his skill and ability and how he changed the business, please go down to the bottom, hit subscribe to Triple T Live, hit like if you like it, give us a 5-star rating if you like it. We do unfortunately have to talk about our sponsors. Go to tripletradio.com. You can see our landing page. I'm one of the sponsors, but we also have vetted the best in the business to give you guys deals. We have redlinegoods.com, who makes incredible interior parts custom made with Italian leather from your car. And they do a great job. Redlinegoods.com. Talk to our friend Mike. Mention code Cueball. Save yourself 15%. Also, you can go to, if you're going to rent a car, Hertz Rental Car will give you a deal. They're one of our sponsors. We have TripAdvisor. If you're going to book a trip, listen, I went onto this Trivago site, and I'm booking a trip. And you know what happened? It tells you which place is going to give you the best airfare. And you know which one was the best airfare and hotel package? TripAdvisor. I swear to you. So, and that's one of our sponsors, TripAdvisor. So get on over there. Sponsors are great. Get over there. Take a look. Buy something. Keep us on the air. Hit like, hit subscribe. We'll see you next Tuesday night, 8 o'clock live. Nick London, Cueball Carmichael, Triple T Live on YouTube, baby. Don't miss it, or I'll hunt you down and I'll beat you with an inch here.
Titles presents to you Nicholas London and Cueball.